Okay. OK， 时间到了啊，请各位合掌。南无妙觉回向佛菩萨。南无妙觉回向佛菩萨。南无妙觉回向佛菩萨。无上甚深微妙法，百千万劫难遭遇。我今见闻得受持，愿解如来真实义。All right. Welcome, everyone. It is the 15th of April, tax day. 这要付税今天。Welcome to our evening lecture for the third night of our Emperor Liang repentance here at the Gold Coast Dharma Realm. Glad you could be with us. Now, we have, because it's a week-long series, we're not doing the Qingfa at the start. We're doing it the first day and then the last day. So if it seems like something's missing, that's what it was. Also, we are going through topics for a primer, an introductory text on the practices of the Mahayana. So when people say, 八万四千法门哪一个对我最对机呢? Which of the 84,000 Dharma doors is the best one for me? You'll have something to say. You can choose. You can make a decision. Master Hua would always say, pick the one you like. There are none that are not number one. They're all the best. It's simply a question of which one you like and which one is suited. And you don't have to pick one. You can pick multiple practices. Not that you want to go shopping and be casual in your approach. You want to, what do they say? 一门深入. However, at 一门 can be, let's say you like to both meditate and also to bow. That's perfectly fine. All right, so first night we talked about 孝道, filial respect, because this is funny. A lot of Chinese advanced practitioners will say, hey, 我想听佛法的讲座怎么讲到孝道呢? I want to listen to Buddhism. Why did you talk about filiality? In fact, this lecture is not only for advanced practitioners, Lao Xiuxing types, it's also for beginners, people who are very interested in mindfulness and want to go deeper. They want to know what exists beyond mindfulness. After mindfulness, what? What's next? So the answer to that is to deepen your practice by going inside to the roots of your very life, which, when explored to their end, can take you to great compassion. So repaying parents' kindness can connect you to your roots in humanity. 人之根, right, the roots of being a human. Okay, so that's one. Number two, we looked at last night bowing. How this basic practice is shared among different religions, but is really foremost among the practices that get us in the door. Samantabhadra Bodhisattva, Pushen Pusa, has 10 particular practices that experts on Buddhism and experts on the Avatamsaka say are the key to going all the way up the Bodhisattva path to Buddhahood. And those 10 practices begin with bowing, Li Jing Zhu Fo. So our own teacher, Master Hsuan began his practices by bowing. So there it is. We're on the path and understanding this. And again, let me say, just like filiality was essentially unknown in the West, bowing to the Buddha, putting your head down on the ground, seems to many Westerners like the last thing that they want to do. How does that take us to Buddhahood, right? That's the question. So, that's 2. Now, tonight, I've got one more topic. Yesterday, I said, tonight we're going to talk about practice number 2, Cheng Zan Rulai, praising the thus come one. I changed my mind. We may wait until tomorrow for that one. What I want to talk about tonight is another practice that is not specifically, not strictly it's not in the 10 practices of Samantabhadra, but for many Westerners, it's essential to putting us on the path. And what is that? It's diet. It's what we fuel our bodies with to get us to great compassion. And as soon as I say that, there are people who go, oh no, here goes that monk again, interfering in my dinner table. I want to learn about enlightenment, and you're talking about food? I'm out of here, right? People will say that. There are other people who, when they hear Buddhism and diet, right away get very defensive. And it's really interesting. When I go out to the Buddhist world and people ask questions, they say, "法师法师, 请问, 请法师开示, 慈悲开示, they say. Please be compassionate and answer. What do you suppose the top 3 questions are? It's very predictable for people who have encountered the Han Chuan Fojiao, the Chinese Mahayana. Among the first ones is all those practices, which one is the best? That's one of the top 3. But one of those top 3 questions is, 法师, 能不能吃鸡蛋呢? Can we eat eggs? That's one. And among the top 3 questions is, 法师, what's wrong with onions and garlic? 2 of the top 3 questions have to do with food. Because why? Our Chinese tradition and the Vietnamese tradition, among the entire big family of Buddhists, we are among the only 2 that talk about restrictions to diet, such as no meat, no eggs, no onions, no garlic, the pungent plants. And people can't understand the relationship. So, all right, so in other words, diet is a big topic. Now, there are a lot of people, Buddhists, more Buddhists are meat eaters than are vegetarian, believe it or not, which is so unexpected. People, yeah, and of course, by talking this way, I cannot avoid stepping on people's toes. Sorry, but that's the way it is. So we have a dear friend in the interfaith world, a man named Charles Gibbs, and Charles was the executive director of the United Religions Initiative, URI.org. He is an Episcopal priest. He is a minister in the Episcopal Church, and Charles is a vegetarian. So he was at a conference, he told me this story. He was at a conference, and sitting across from him was a Buddhist priest. I won't mention what country he was from. And they were sitting across the table at a dinner. And of course, at most interfaith dinners now, they say, would you like meat or would you like the vegetarian option? And so Charles, I'm a vegetarian. And the Buddhist sitting across from him said, I'll take the chicken. And then after the meal, he lit up a cigarette. And Charles said, he has a great sense of humor. He had a smile in his eye. I said, excuse me, he said, many of the Buddhists who I know are vegetarian and also don't smoke tobacco. Could I ask about your style? And the priest, the Buddhist priest, was so offended that he got up and moved his seat. He didn't have anything to say. He thought, how rude that you would ask me that question. He stood up and walked out. So that's interesting, isn't it? Now, I was just at a major Buddhist conference, a World Buddhist Forum in Ningbo, China. And there were thousands and thousands of what were called 外国贵宾, foreign guests. I was among them. We were the guests from Australia and in America. And in the meals were done, the hosting, the Chinese, the Buddhist Association of China did a wonderful job of preparing and hosting all of the guests. It was really, really well done. They put a lot of attention in it and put a lot of money into it. So we were taken care of very well. But the places, the dining halls where we were offered meals 3 times a day, you came in the front door and there were 2 hallways. One hallway said 素食 and one hallway said 荤食. The 荤食 attendees outnumbered the 素食 by double. So, in other words, this topic is not so insignificant, all right? That's why I decided to talk about that tonight. Here we go. Start out with a flavor of how the Hanchuan Fojiao pays attention to diet. This was a conference in Los Angeles in 2003. My gosh, 22 years ago, called the Healthy Living Conference. It was my first experience speaking to an entire America's largest vegetarian conference. So there it was, and I was the monk. You can see me there on the screen, and I prepared why eat a plant-based diet. One reason, health. You live longer. Number 2, the difference in the environment. Number 3, the number of people in the world who don't have no food to eat, who could eat if the minority let go of their meat. And particularly from the Buddhist point of view, cause and effect, and great compassion. So these first 3 are global. Every religion can talk about these. Cause and effect and great compassion are 2 that the Buddhists are very careful of. What does it say? 杀生之罪能令众生堕善恶道，若受人生有2种果报：1短命，2多病. Says the karma of killing brings 2 retributions. 1 is short life, and 2, much illness. This is what a Buddhist sutra, Huayan Jing, says. So I introduced this. This is the Buddhist idea of cause and effect. And you could see in the conference, the people were, whoa, we haven't heard this before. They were looking at each other. This is yin and guo. Now, beautiful illustration. Which is the yin and which is the guo? Which is the cause, which is the effect? Here's the cause, down in the front of the screen. Here's the effect. 杀生之罪, right? Here, these are butchers butchering a pig, and the result is people killing people. Now, this principle, many people find it very hard to accept. Very hard to accept. Are we ready? Here we go. For countless years, the bitter stew of hate goes boiling on. Its vengeful broth is ocean deep, impossible to calm. To learn the cause of so much conflict, terror, hate, and war, listen to the cries at midnight by the butcher's door. 千百年来万里耕，怨声四海恨难平。欲知世上刀兵劫，且问兔闷夜半声。I was among the first monks to settle the Calgary, Alberta, Canada monastery called Gold Buddha Monastery, called Avatamsaka Monastery. It was our first monastery there was an old brick mom and pop grocery store in a old neighborhood in Calgary called Ramsey. It's one of the oldest neighborhoods. It's very close to the railroad, to the train tracks going through Calgary. And when we first got there, it was 1980, maybe 86, 85, 86, something like that. There was still, close to the railroad tracks, a slaughterhouse, 屠宰场. And we could hear at night the train stopping outside the slaughterhouse in the dead of night, black night, midnight, and off the cars came dong 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 dong, heavy four-legged animals going off the train into the slaughterhouse. And this has happened once a week, and you could feel the energy and the pain and the suffering. It was exactly like this last line, where it says, 且闻兔闷夜半声. Listen, please, sir, to the sounds outside the butcher's door at midnight. They didn't do this during the day. They wouldn't bring the death trains to the slaughterhouse during the day because people would have protested. But at night, you could hear and feel the atmosphere of the animals who were, this was their last train ride, you could say. So here it is. This is the cause and the effect. 5 years later, slaughterhouse shut down. They closed it for good. The trains no longer stop there. For countless years, the bitter stew of hate goes boiling on. Its vengeful broth is ocean deep, impossible to calm. After the ones killed come back and take the lives of those who killed them before, the Shurangama Sutra talks about how this killing and then revenge for the revenge just gets so mixed up, and the energy of it is so strong that you might want to say, I quit, I'm never going to kill again, but you get pulled back in because you owe a debt to someone whom you killed in the past. It's an ocean deep, impossible to calm. Where did this warfare come from? Conflict, terror, hate, and more. Listen to the cries at midnight by the butcher's door. Too true. 千百年来万里耕，怨声四海恨难平。欲知世上刀兵劫，且闻兔闷夜半声. Okay, there's also something called same body, great compassion, 同体大悲. This is also alive in us, in humans, right? We share with living beings earth, air, fire, and water that make up our bodies. It's just nobody can deny. We share with living beings a single nature, not just humans, but humans and two-footed, four-footed, many-footed, no-footed. We are interdependent and connected with all the beings on the planet. What we do to one, all feel. So, the Netta Brahma, Fan Wangjing says, a disciple of the Buddha has to maintain a mind of kindness and cultivate the practice of fang sheng, liberating beings. We can reflect every male being has been my father, all female beings have been my mothers. So when somebody kills and eats these beings, they slaughter my parents. It's that our connection has integrated so many times. Further, he says, he kills a body that was mine. For all earth and water served as my body, all fire and air came alive in me. So I am always going to feng sheng, and in every life be born in the Dharma and teach others to do the same. Take a look. 这个大家看看. What's going on in the picture? Here's a deer. 有山路, 一匹山路. Look at his footprints. Here's a garden. Here's a man who lives on the mountain, and he's got a broom. What's he doing? He's sweeping the footprints away, so when the hunters come, they won't see the footprints. They won't know the deer was here. This is the kind-hearted hermit living in the mountains. By removing the traces of the deer, he's helping save its life, right? This is Lu Fu Huang, Tang Chao de Shi Ren. Around this lonely mountaintop, a myriad peaks revolve. I've come to cultivate ascetics' disciplined resolve. I take my broom and sweep away the deer's tracks in the snow. The deer passed by, but in the morning, hunters will not know. Right? 人隐者，万风回扰一风生，到此常修苦行心，自扫雪中归路迹，天明恐有猎人熏。Right? Very beautiful. 唐朝的陆浮皇，就是慈悲，也是在人的心里边。有因含果. Okay, this is another kind of cause and effect. Kind causes bring out kindness as a response. This is one of my favorite experiences. True story. This happened on 3 steps in 1 bow, a pilgrimage that I took at one point. There's a place in Southern California called San Simeon. A movie mogul, and let's see, actually he was not. He was a newspaper magnate named William Randolph Hearst. William Randolph Hearst. He owned many newspapers, and he was one of the earliest millionaires. In today's world, he'd be a billionaire. So he used his money and he built a place called San Simeon, which is a castle. It's up on the bluff above the highway. And it's really a castle. He bought it brick by brick from Europe to America. And he had a zoo that had African animals, elephants and zebras and giraffes in California on Highway 1. William Randolph Hearst, amazing human being. He had a cattle ranch on the land, and as we were bowing by one day, this Ford Bronco pulls up in a cloud of dust, and I was sitting on the side of the road writing in a journal, and across the road comes a cowboy. He's wearing cowboy boots, he's got spurs on the back of his boots, he's wearing blue jeans, he's got a big belt buckle, and he comes over chink, 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 with his spurs. And I'm looking at Heng Chao. Heng Chao's looking at me. We think this guy's going to pull a gun and shoot us, maybe. He's a cowboy. Or kick us off his ranch. And he doesn't. We look up, and he's got his palms together. He says, "How you doing, fellas?" He says, "You're Buddhist, right?" And we're like, he says, "My name's Howard Swanson. I'm a Buddhist too. Can I sit down?" He sits down right beside us. And we're thinking, only in California do you have Buddhist cowboys. So he says, "What you doing here?" And he said, "We've been watching you doing the bowing. Glad you made it this far, fellas," he said. And then he says, he says, "Actually," I want to ask you a question. He says, look right here. He pulls out his Sri Lanka Buddhist Association membership card, refuge disciple, Howard Swanson. He says, let me tell you my story. He says, I grew up around here, and when I was a young boy, the way to make money was to go to work in the mines. There were, around my hometown, he said, but I didn't want to work in the mines because the men there are just dirty. He said, their minds are dirty, they have dirty thoughts, dirty mouth, their bodies are covered in dust. He said, I didn't want to be that way, but I had to make money. So you know what I did? He said, I took poems and memorized them, and I would recite poetry forwards and then recite it back just to keep my mind clean from getting polluted by all these dirty guys down in the mines. He said, I memorized the Rubaiyat by Omar Khayyam. He said, you know that one, fellas? We're like, this guy, this is amazing. So he said, but I got a problem. He says, I want to ask you a serious question. He says, for some reason, I just can't meditate. I don't know what's wrong, but every time I try to sit still, my mind is just whirling like that. I said, what can you tell me? You're Buddhists. He said, y'all meditate, right? Yes, we do. So I didn't talk. I was keeping silent. But my colleague, Marty, said, let me ask you something, Howard. He says, do you eat meat? And Howard says, do I eat meat? I'm a cowboy. Of course I eat meat. What else is there to eat? He said. So Heng Chao says, well, he said, you know what? He said, I bet your diet has something to do with your inability to meditate and quiet your mind. He said, what you talking about? He said, I've been to Sri Lanka. Nobody said anything about, he said, look here, killing, stealing, lust, lies, intoxicants. He says, I hold those precepts. And Marty says, yeah, but as a Buddhist, you should hold the precept against eating meat because that's taking part in the killing. And he said, nobody ever told me that in Sri Lanka, he said. So Heng Chao says, well, think of it this way. He says, when if somebody went to kill you, would you be happy? He says, hell no. And so Marty said, the cows are the giant animals. You punch cows for a living. He said, they weigh 1,600 pounds, and they got a brain twice as big as yours. They feel it all. Everything that you feel, a cow feels. And so Howard says, yeah, I can see that part. But if I don't eat meat, what is there? He said. So Heng Chao thought, he went to the back of the car. We had our Plymouth station wagon there. He went back and he opened a box and he pulled out a can of Liang Pai Luo Han Zhai, Taiwan de Su Shi Guan Tou Luo Han Zhai, Liang Pai, companion brand Arhat vegetables. He said, hey, somebody gave us these yesterday. We don't carry food, but we got them yesterday. So he said, here, I'll give you 2 cans of our Arhat vegetables. Howard takes the can, he says, this looks like dog food, he says. And Marty says, yeah, but he said, if you want to meditate, try cutting out the meat for a week, he says, and then let us know how your meditation is going. So Howard says, well, he says, I'd give a lot to learn how to meditate. He says, if I start eating vegetables, he said, those guys in the bunkhouse, they're going to laugh me out of there. He said, but I got a Buddhist fist. He says, I'll answer with this, he said. So Heng Chao says, no, Howard, that's okay. You just ignore them. It's all right. You don't have to fight with them. He says, all right, I'll give it a try. Thanks, fellas, he said. Jumped in his Ford Bronco, boom, away he went. So we kept on bowing another 7 days, and sure enough, boom, here comes the truck. And here he is again, and gets off out of his truck, pump, comes over. He says, hey, fellas. He said, boy, he said, it really worked. He said, who knew? Who knew? He said, it was the diet, it was the food all along. He said, I had the best meditation I ever had. That was just something else. He said, yeah, you know what? In the bunkhouse, he said, I got some guys meditating with me. You got more of that dog food? That's what it tastes like, but I'll eat it. He said, who would have thought it was the vegetables? So Howard said, thank you, fellas, and got back in his truck and drove away. So vegetarian cowboys are something that actually exist in California. And if we want to be compassionate, pay attention to the effect of meat and the karma of killing and the heat that's in the meat that gets into our system. And we might want to be quiet, but we can't, right? Okay, take a look at this picture here. What's the story? Here is somebody talking to two young people. They're in a boat and they are fishing. Bai Ji, I walked at leisure by the pond to watch the fish afloat. I passed two youths with bait and rods in their fishing boat. With different hearts, we take delight in watching perch and trout. I have come to feed the fish. They've come to fish them out. 绕池闲走看鱼游，正值儿童弄鸟粥，一种爱鱼心各异，我来时时耳垂钩。Right? 不同爱鱼不同的动机。Yeah. Now this is one of my very, very favorites. So look at this faithful dog. He's got this, all he wants is a smile from his owner. Here's the dog's bowl down here. His tail is going bunk, 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 like that. But the owner has got this 5,000-yard stare. He's got the looking long, thinking about the dog, thinking about living beings. 黄庭坚, my flesh and creature's flesh are different only in name. Although we come in many shapes, our nature is the same. 我肉众生肉，名殊体不殊，愿同一种性，只是别心躯。Right? 黄庭坚是宋朝的宰相。So, when we think about choices that we have, so many people on the planet have no choice. The choice is there food at all? In the Horn of Africa, Sudan, South Sudan, in Somalia, in Gaza, there are thousands and thousands of people who have not enough food to eat at all. They have no choice. We who live, we have enough wealth to be able to listen to a sutra lecture online. We have choices, and we can choose to pay no attention to the suffering of others, or we can choose to nourish our bodies in a way that doesn't cause suffering for others. It's really up to us. So, want to share, let's see here. There we are. This is a sort of a long personal story. I'll go quickly through it because I think a lot of people can relate to it. Excuse me. Instead of preaching, and I don't want to shake my finger at anyone because by telling my story, I think people will understand choices that you can make. So, college student, 1969, I had a chance to go to Taiwan to learn Chinese. I called Gary Snyder. He was a well-known poet, still living in California. We were stopping in San Francisco. My teacher, Thomas Fitzsimmons, had given me Gary's address. Gary Snyder said, "Oh, you're going to Japan, aren't you, after Taiwan? When you get to Kyoto, go to Daitokuji, Reiwanji, Mampukuji. Those are places that might take Westerners." Let's see here. I'm going to skip ahead. His advice was that when I'm done and I need to come home from Japan, don't buy a plane ticket for $1,000. He said, instead, if you have an American passport, go to the Merchant Marine office, and if they have a job on a merchant ship, they will hire you for one trip, and you'll get home with money in your pocket. So it turned out exactly like that. The day it was time for me to leave Yokohama, I went to the Merchant Marine office there, the union, and they hired me for a trip back to Oakland. Now, here's where we pick up the story. I had been living in an apartment before I went to Taiwan and Japan, eating brown rice and vegetables, steamed vegetables and brown rice. That was what we ate, and I didn't know anybody who was a real vegetarian, but I had heard that if you ate vegetarian, your meditation improves, they said. So I was a meditator at this point. I got to Antaisi in Kyoto, Jingdu, and they ate vegetarian mostly, but only because they didn't have any money. It wasn't, if they had more money, they would have bought niku for sukiyaki, gyu niku, right? 就是说牛肉，他们会烧牛肉。So the Chinese tradition talks about compassion, simplicity, distributing resources fairly, cause and effect, holding precepts, not taking part in killing. But the reason why the temple in Japan ate no meat was they were poor, and people didn't make offerings the same way. So, okay, down to the story. Time for me to leave. I went to Yokohama, sure enough, got on board, and when I got on board with my suitcase going back to America, and I learned what my job was going to be as a sailor. I was a merchant marine, right? I was what's called messmate third class. It was the lowest job on ship. My job was to wash the dishes. I was a dishwasher, and also I made salads for lunch. Those are the two things that I had to do. So the first day, they welcomed me on board. Olson, the cook, said, "All right." He says, "Anything you want, here, have at it. I bet you're hungry, right?" he said. And there was an African-American gentleman named Stevens, who was a baker. So I had been eating as a student on a budget of pennies, brown rice and vegetables. But there I was on this ship, and it was as if so the lunch buffet that I faced was American food from the Midwest, gravy, rich, fat, heart-stopping American foods, and I stuffed my stomach. I ate roast beef with parsley potatoes, ham with biscuits and gravy, turkey with dressings and gravy, potatoes with extra butter, sweet potatoes with cranberry sauce and butter, green peas, butter beans, butter, okra, macaroni, cheese, and then dessert, home-baked chocolate cake, hot, fresh mince pie with ice cream, and an eclair. I was not a coffee drinker, but here on the SS Oakland, this merchant ship, I ate so much. I ate as much in one day as I had eaten in 7 days before. And of course, it was meat. I got so sick, I could not walk. I just sat where I worked underneath the stainless steel trays in the galley where the dirty dishes were stacked up. I was hired to wash the dishes. They didn't care that I was sick. I had to do my job. I crawled underneath the countertop and I held my stomach in between periods of vomiting in this crew's bathroom. And the ship was still in port. We hadn't set sail. So then the ship disembarked. First through the channel out to the ocean was very smooth. 2 hours later, the swell started to move and I was seasick for 3 days until I got used to the waves. I was miserable. Since I was working at a job, I had to get the salads out, I had to clean the dishes. I would do a little bit and then crawl back under the counter and hold my stomach. Now, the chef, Olson, had to cook for sailors from Seattle, San Diego, Brooklyn, Savannah, Texas. Nobody complained. My problem was I had been eating brown rice and vegetables, an Asian vegetarian diet for months in Taiwan and in Japan. And suddenly I stepped into mainstream America, crammed my stomach with food that you could have eaten in Mobile, Alabama, or Boston, Massachusetts, and it sent my system into shock. The meat did not digest. My body rejected it. The grease, the gravy, the texture, the odor made me sick. I couldn't get it out of my system fast enough. And once it took a week to purge what I had put in that one meal, and that was it. No more meat for me. That was my last experience with mainstream American food. My last year of college in Michigan, I ate vegetables, brown rice, occasionally a bite of fish, squash, home-baked bread. We bought everything that we could that we grew on the land ourselves. So there was a local whole food store in Michigan where I ate. We bought soybeans. We made our own tofu. We made our own doujiang. We ate buckwheat and alfalfa as sprouts, douya cai. We bought varieties of flour to bake into breads, and my body felt so healthy, so connected to the earth around that I had no wish to go back to mainstream American eating. So my first experience as a vegetarian showed me that I not only could do well without meat, I did better without meat. And my memory of that misery on board the SS Oakland as a meat-eating sailor stayed with me, and I never want to eat meat again. So many people are surprised to learn that there are actually more meat-eating Buddhists than vegetarian Buddhists. We heard how the leader of Tibetan Buddhism, because the doctor's orders, eats 1 day meat, 1 day vegetable. People are shocked to learn that he is also not a vegetarian. People automatically assume that because Buddhists are compassionate, that we should avoid eating animals, but not so. Buddhism arose in India and went to Sri Lanka, and then to China, Korea, Japan, Vietnam, as well as south to Thailand, Burma, Cambodia, Laos, north to Nepal, Tibet, Mongolia. Now it has come to the West. And everywhere the Dharma goes, it influences the cultures it meets, and it's also influenced by each new culture. So the Chinese tradition, the Vietnamese tradition, take vegetarian eating as fundamental, basic. If you showed up here at Gold Coast Dharma Realm and ask for fried chicken and rib-eye steak and pork chops, people would be shocked, as much as if you were smoking cigarettes and drinking alcohol. In other Asian countries, people say that there is another rule that overrides compassion, and that's that monks and nuns must not choose from the offerings they receive. There are traditions that say, our rule, that rule, beats compassion. If somebody gives you food and you reject it, you're not being a Fu Tian Sang. So they say, whatever people offer a monk or nun, we have to accept it regardless, no exceptions. Okay? So we, Mahayana Buddhists, say in response that the duty of a monk or a nun who receives offerings from kind-hearted donors is to give wisdom back to the donor. One of the basic instructions is that if you give a monk meat and he accepts it, he is breaking the precept against killing, and he's creating harm, not blessings. So why would a layperson offer food to a monk? To plant blessings, 种福田, and to create goodness, 就增长善根. So the job of the monk and the nun is to maximize the goodness by instructing the lay people to make pure offerings without any corruption, by including the cause of killing and suffering. So what we say to the monks who say, oh, you have to accept what they give you, we say to the layperson, you want to give me meat? I accept the intention of your offering of food that you like. Maybe you think this is the very best food you have. Maybe it's food you yourself can't afford to eat. You give the best food, meat, to the monks. Well, I see that. And at the same time, I want your offering to be pure without suffering. So next time, give me food that involves no killing. I get along fine without meat and fish. I like to eat lower on the food chain, closer to the earth. You don't have to put grain through the animal before you give it to me. I can eat the grain without the animal in the middle, just fine. Thank you. So eating vegetarian offerings is better. So if we speak Dharma in that way, we are giving wisdom to the laity in return for the food that they give. So there are people who will tell you that the Buddha prescribed 3 kinds of pure meat for monks who were living in high altitudes or in regions where you can't grow plants. Well, if no other food is available, monks could eat meat that they had not seen killed, had not heard killed, and didn't think it was killed especially for them. However, if you live in a climate that does produce vegetables, there's no excuse. So, there we go. People who might be listening, Sam, do you have any questions? Do we need to? Okay, right. People may say, well, I'm a Buddhist, I agree, I don't want to eat meat, however, I cook for my family and they are not Buddhists, and I don't want to force them. My mom and my dad are not Buddhists, and if I give them meat, if I don't give them meat, they'll say, oh, 无你不孝, you're not filial. So, say to them, the best thing to do is not try to talk them out of it. Also, do not make meat eaters feel bad or guilty about their food choices. Why? People understand that mother's food is her love for her children. If you say your mother fed you wrong because she gave you meat, what you're telling people is their mother didn't love them. Are they going to accept that? They will not accept that. They know that moms feed their children, not only human moms, but birds and animals too, so they can grow and be healthy and strong. If your mother and her mother and her mother and her mother understood that meat was the best food for humans, then that's how it came down. And the earliest food that we eat, we interpret as mother's love. Now, as we grow up, we hear principle that says meat is not the healthiest food, and it also carries karma. As adults, we can reason and from a place of compassion and knowledge, decide to let meat go and choose instead harmless, nutritious food. Food that engages no harm in the animal. That's a choice we can make as an adult. Now, I personally spent the first 19 years of my life eating everything. Meat, fish, eggs, etc., etc., etc. So, what I say to people now, if you are the only vegetarian in your household, try this. Say to your family, whoever is the cook, are you the provider or is it someone else in the family? Say to them, could we have a meatless Monday? Pick one day a week. And on that day, we're going to eat delicious food that doesn't involve any killing. Or, if that's too big a step, say, I would like to offer one veggie dish on one meal, one dinner per week. And make sure that what you give them is really tasty. You can share the recipe. If you're a young person listening and you say, I want my mom to become vegetarian, you show her that you are willing to prepare the food and ask for her help and say, I want to eat a kind-hearted dish. Kindness, I want kindness to be in my food, in my diet. So you prepare something yummy, something really delicious that you cook with your mom's help. Offer that once a week. And everybody, I guarantee, people will go, hey, that's not bad. Yeah, tastes pretty good. And then do it again next week and again next week. Make the recipes different and varied. Pretty quickly, you'll move from one dish to one night per week. And then if it's your turn to cook, you can say, actually, I'm being filial. I want you to live longer, so I'm going to cook foods that increase your lifespan. Cruelty-free, plant-based food, right? So this is a way to help people let go of what they know was their mother's love, which is what they were raised eating. It's very difficult to convince people that their mother was wrong and gave them bad food by giving them meat, okay? Now, that's one. We, in the Mahayana, we have another situation which is very challenging, and that's the practice of no onions, no shallots, no garlic, no leeks, and no chives. They're known as the 5 pungent plants. Doesn't include ginger, doesn't include curry. Now, this is an old tradition, and we share this tradition with the Jain religion, well known in India. Outside India, the Jain tradition, Jain Jiao, is not well known, but in India, where Buddhism came from, everybody knows the Jains. And the Jains, like the Buddhists, and many Hindus, but not all, understand pungent plants, wuxing, cause an increase in desire and an increase in anger if you eat them either cooked or raw. So anger and desire are things that cultivators want to decrease. So we preserve that ancient tradition. There's really some evidence that the Buddha himself did not eat pungent plants. And yes, it's a challenge. That's difficult because every pizza in the world has onions and garlic in the sauce. And if you go to southern France, if you go to Italy and you say no onions and garlic, they think you are truly an alien from some other planet, because onions and garlic is such a fundamental part of food. But we can choose from the point of view of cultivation to anything that reduces desire and reduces anger, helps us cultivate. So we who choose that, it's really important for us not to take the position that because of our food choices, we are superior to others. It's really important that we don't look down on people who still eat onions and garlic and meat. It's not easy to let them go. But truly, from the point of view of compassion, we want to put ourselves in the shoes of all living creatures. You say, 己所不欲，勿施于人。我不愿意他来吃我的生肉，所以我不吃他的生肉。Right? 己所不欲，勿施于人。这是黄金的戒律，一定的。It is absolutely the case that I don't want to be eaten by anything else, so I won't eat others. The golden rule, what you don't want done to you, do not do to others. Okay, that's a good place to begin our cultivation. That way, when we meditate, our bodies are clean and pure, our bloodstream is clean and pure, and it's very easy to enter samadhi. 我们这样吃呢，很容易就入定，因为那个你的血就没有那个荤的那种热啊，而且呢，没有这种恶报那个杀业不来找你啊。So, okay, see if we can't increase the amount of meatless nights. Yes, ma'am. Question. You may ask a question.
How do you respond to someone who is visibly losing a lot of weight because she cannot take, for example, beans or the typical protein sources from vegetarian diet? She's been vegetarian for quite a long time, but all the doctors she see talk about you cannot take vegetarian food anymore.
Okay.
So how do we respond to that if she asks, what do I do?
Okay, the question, people couldn't hear the question on the line, online. The question was, and correct me if I don't get it right, there is an individual who wants to be a vegetarian, but somehow vegetable or beans and such legumes is causing this person to lose weight, and doctors tell her that she cannot eat this way because she's going to ruin her health. So what do you say? The way to think about that is food is medicine. All food is medicine. We say, the Wu Guan, as a medicine cures illness, I take only what I need to sustain my cultivation. So that is an unusual situation. That's not a normal situation. So that person needs to, everything they put in their mouth should be done with a doctor's advice as medicine. As the food is, it's not for flavor, it's for keeping the body alive. And somehow they're out of balance because 99.9% of the people in the world who eat vegetarian don't have that problem. So until she can return to, she doesn't have to feel like the Buddha's going to be unhappy with her. It's not the case that she's a bad Buddhist. It's a case that she's an unhealthy Buddhist at this point. Follow a doctor's advice, and as is possible, let meat go bit by bit. If she has to eat fish oil or whatever it is, that's certainly go in front of the Buddha and bow and explain. Master Hua ate garlic as medicine. Some days Shifu would come down and we could smell the garlic, and he would announce, he said, today I told the Buddha that I needed garlic to keep the heat in my body, so I'm going to eat garlic. 当药品吃, right? I ate it as medicine. And we would go, oh wow, okay. So most people in the world are meat eaters. We choose to let meat go. But everything that we eat, we should eat as medicine to keep the body from wasting away, right? That's the way to see it. Also, Medicine Buddha has a mantra that will keep us healthy. Here we go. Dedicate merit. Om Namo Bhagavate Satya Guru Vaidurya Prabharachaya Tathāgataya Arahate Samyak Sambuddhaya Tathāgata Om Vaisaji Vaisaji Vaisajya Samukate Swaha Om Namo Bhagavate Vaisajya Guru Vaidurya Prabharachaya Tathāgataya Arahate Samyak Sambuddhaya Tathāgata Om Vaisaji Vaisaji Vaisajya Samukate Swaha 再来 Om Namo Bhagavate Vaisajya Guru Vaidurya Prabharachaya Tathāgataya Arahate Samyak Sambuddhaya Tathāgata Om. Here we go. Vaisajya 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 Samukate Swaha. We will conclude by bowing to Guanyin Pusa, and we'll see you again tomorrow night for more investigations on 汪洋星探佛法那么多法门，哪一个最好？ Here we go. First bow. Second bow. Third bow. Bow in respect to the Venerable Master Dingli Heshan. Alrighty, that'll do it for us for tonight. Amitofo, everybody. Bye-bye now.